This episode of New Politics was released on the 14th of March, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
We've mainly been focused on the wars in Iran today and looking at the ramifications for Australia, but there's a lot of other political issues going on in Australia, David, and the National Party has got a new leader in Matt Canavan, and he's the first senator to lead the National Party, so we just have to see how that works out and whether he'll try to move to the lower house, because that's where all the action is. David Littleproud resigned from the leadership during the week of the National Party. He will remain in Parliament, and for me it was a spend more time with the family type of resignation. There's a whole lot of other rumours going on, but let's not go there. Now, we don't know what a leader is going to be like until they actually get there. That's the same for any political party, but Matt Canavan says that he wants to target One Nation, and One Nation is more of a racist party. It put out all of that anti-Islam and anti-immigration messages out. Matt Canavan said the opposite when Pauline Hanson came out and said that there are no good Muslims out there. So I think it will be interesting to see how this all plays out. Now, Matt Canavan did do all of those photo shoots with mining dust on his face just to show that the National Party is a party of mining. But David, I think it should be getting back to its roots of agrarian socialism. And back in 1923 or whenever it was, the National Party, or the Country Party as it was known then, it was created as a party for farmers and for rural workers, and it should get back to its roots if it wants to take back the voters that are going off to One Nation.
I think the Batuta Advocate had a headline saying something like, Matt Canavan promises to be more expensive to all coal owners, not just some of them, or something like that. Look, Canavan, and I think praise where it's due, he did rebuke Pauline Hanson in a way that might have seemed brave to some people in terms of National Party people looking at the vote. He may have lost a few votes in rebuking her, but it was the right thing to do. So let's be fair there. Doesn't mean that he hasn't been one of the less credible when it came down to the citizenship thing. He claimed that his mum got him to sign a form that he didn't know what he was signing or some such, which doesn't seem to me to be the most qualified way to show that you're suitable for leadership.
Well, he might not be able to read Italian. That's the other thing.
That's true. But you'd still think, what am I signing here, Mum? And does it affect my role as an Australian senator? I do wonder how he's going to be able to be an effective Deputy Prime Minister from the Senate. Whether they're going to give David Littleproud a, in brackets, another, close brackets, tap on the shoulder and get him to sit down from his seat, which carries risk. Canavan's not the most popular. Littleproud was New South Wales, Canavan's Queensland. Canavan's not a shoo-in to win a New South Wales national seat, particularly with One Nation nipping at their heels. He'll probably get the 5%, 3 to 5% swing that leaders of the party get, but that might not be enough. Wasn't enough for Dutton, wasn't enough for Howard. When John Gorton moved from the Senate to the lower house to become Prime Minister, he just stepped into a Harold Holt's seat, as Harold had drowned, presumably off the coast of Victoria. So I suspect they might try that. They'd be much better to try a Queensland seat, I think, where you'd get closer to your 5% swing than your 3% swing, which you'd get in New South Wales. And a good, strong local One Nation candidate might knock him out in New South Wales. Not that there are very many strong One Nation candidates, but a well-known local will certainly help things when it comes to winning elections. Yeah, there has been, in the past, senators have been acting prime ministers around Christmas time and things like that. It's rare, but it happens. And it's usually at a really quiet time of the year where not much has been expected to happen, and the Prime Minister's been on leave, the Deputy Prime Minister's been on leave, the Attorney General's been on leave. So you move into the upper house just for administrative. Parliament isn't sitting. So I don't know how...
But I guess the point is that he might not be in the position to be Deputy Prime Minister for some time to come, or acting Prime Minister. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait to see how that all goes.
But even acting opposition leader. It may be the final throw of the towel for the coalition. What, it broke twice under Littleproud. I can't see that Canavan is a healing figure, shall we say. And I think too, the coalition is in trouble mostly because it's lost its voter base in the Liberal Party, and in many ways it's lost its purpose as a governing body and needs a restructure. So, I don't know, people grow into the roles too. People definitely grow into the role, and he might do that, and we hope he does, but I suspect he won't.
But I think this all continues with that interesting development that's happening on the right side of politics. And while I think it's pretty interesting, it could also get quite messy, that whole splintering of the right side of politics. And I think there is that rivalry between the National Party and One Nation. I think it's been exacerbated by the recent defection of Barnaby Joyce over to One Nation. And whenever an MP or a senator is elected under one party in an election and then they defect to another party or they become an independent, that's when all the daggers come out, because a lot of money and resources from that party go into getting that person elected, and then they defect. Well, that's not a good look, and they're not going to be very happy about that. And the Nationals do see One Nation as a direct threat to their voting base, and that's farmers, the small business owners in the regions, Conservative voters. But even though the National Party still keeps winning seats, I think they hover between 12 and 13 seats, and they've been consistent over the past 4 or 5 election cycles. They're actually working against the interests of people in the regions through their support of mining, agribusiness, and railing against climate change and renewable energy and going for nuclear energy. I just don't think that's in the interests of the people in regional areas and rural areas. Not that One Nation is that different to all of that, but essentially they're going after the same group of voters. And the other thing is that there's also Clive Palmer. He's suggested that he is going to run for politics again under the banner of United Australia Party. And the UAP, I'm not sure if it existed in 2019. It might have been Palmer United or some different name. But the Clive Palmer did actually hurt the Labor Party in the 2019 federal election. But I think this time around it's going to be hurting the chances of the Nationals and One Nation. And who knows, it might actually be helping the Labor Party at the next election, because you just don't know where all of those preferences are going to flow when you've got so many right-wing parties in the ring having a brawl.
Yeah, it's...
that's if Clive Palmer does actually run. He's only suggested that he might, so let's see what happens there. But it's going to be quite interesting at the next election.
One Nation is saying the right things. And when I say they're saying the right things, I don't agree with them. I absolutely condemn what they're saying. But they are speaking to the electorate that they are trying to win over. And they're highlighting what the National Party used to highlight. Rural people need protection, rural people, farmers. Now, One Nation, of course, is caught up in the coal industry too. There's no question about that. But Pauline Hanson is at least cunning, and I can't use the word smart enough, but she's at least cunning to know enough to know. And she may even believe this, even though what they say and what they do are completely different things. She is trying to win the rural vote by speaking about rural issues, that she doesn't understand them properly, that she is happy to use data that comes from nowhere, that she forgets half the stuff she's meant to say, that she doesn't comprehend the other half is irrelevant. Voters are hearing at the moment, this is what we're not interested in, big coal running things and buying our property and digging it up and then leaving when they're done. We want a sustainable agricultural policy that keeps our generationally owned farms viable and living and good, which is, of course, agrarian socialism. Share it all, make sure that in bad years it's covered, in good years it's covered. And Pauline Hanson and One Nation are saying those types of things. That they don't mean them or that they don't even understand them isn't the point. The point is that people are hearing what they want to hear. And that's why at this stage, One Nation are doing well in the polls. Unfortunately, they have a record of dropping a bomb on their own campaign because they tend not to be disciplined. The party's set up in a way that it's not really democratic, so Pauline can overrule anything at any time. And they will lose, if history is any guide, they will lose pre-selected candidates through local corruptions, through scandals, through overstating. Sure, let's talk about immigration. How many people do we need? No, not like grouping people into this religion good, this religion bad. And I noted even Sherry Markson on Sky News had to rebuke Pauline Hanson over her claims of there are bad Muslims. And Sherry, to her credit, again, said that she didn't agree with what Pauline Hanson said. And when Sherry Markson is the voice of reason in a debate, you're not in a terribly sane place. But again, credit to her for what she said.
And David, I think that your day has finally arrived. Now, for a long, long time, you've argued that Australian politics is going to go through a major political realignment. And I think you actually mentioned that on our very first episode back in 2018. That's 8 years ago. So
Good God.
We've been around for a long time. But it's happening. And it's definitely happening on the centre-right side of politics. And we talked about this just before. The Liberal Party, National Party, One Nation, United Australia Party, or whatever they're going to be called. There's also the Shooters and Fishers Party. And this is reorganising the vote that is traditionally held by the Liberal Party and the National Party through its coalition. But it's just fragmenting all over the place. But this sort of process is rarely contained to the one side of politics. And my feeling is that it can and will affect the entire system. It's just a matter of when, as you've been suggesting for the past 8 years, but it also including the centre-left. And at the moment, the Labor Party hasn't benefited that much from this fracturing on the right. It hasn't been harmed by it either.
No.
But in theory, that's something that could always be exploited and manufactured by the Australian Greens. But I just don't think that they've got the right political skills at this moment to do this. But we've seen how this can all work overseas. And in Britain, in a recent by-election, the Greens Party managed to win a seat from UK Labor, with Labor actually finishing third, and that was their first lower house seat victory ever. And you think that in a parliament of 651 seats, well, that's not such a big deal. It's not so much to write home about, but it's still a pretty big achievement. And the Greens Party is led by Jack Palance. He's a very powerful and effective campaigner. He's developed a style that's verging on left-wing populism, and for a short time, the Greens Party were actually leading in opinion polls in the UK, and that's in itself, that is quite remarkable. But the difference is that Keir Starmer is leading a basket case Labor government over there, and Keir Starmer himself is a bit of a basket case Prime Minister, even though they've got this massive majority. Anthony Albanese over here is not like that. He's a lot more politically competent. But if Anthony Albanese does start to become unpopular, and unpopular wars and military adventures in the Middle East tend to make governments unpopular, well, that might all change. But it's just a question of whether the Australian Greens have got the ability to exploit this type of situation if it does arise. And I just don't think they have at the moment.
I've noted that, and I think I've said this in the past, Larissa Waters hasn't been a terribly prominent leader, but I think she's trying to do the job. And how well she's doing it, I don't know, although the fact that we're not hearing from her all the time suggests that she's taking it very seriously. I think she's trying to rebuild the Greens, the type of thing that Simon Crean did for Labor. And Simon was appreciated for that by knifing him for Mark Latham. But Simon Crean, I would argue, is one of the great Labor leaders because he made Labor eventually. He kept Labor in play as a viable party of government. Okay, they had to lose with Latham, and then there's a whole lot of stuff that it was still another 6 or 7 years before Labor got back into government. But Crean laid the foundation for that. And I suspect that's what's happening with the Greens, that Larissa Waters is sitting down with membership groups and branch meetings, and how do we become viable again? We won enough votes. We won more votes than the National Party, but the National Party's votes are concentrated. The Green votes are spread right over the country. And I think, too, when we look at Britain, you're right to say that Anthony Albanese is a much more capable Prime Minister. And again, this isn't an endorsement of his policies, or this is just the Labor Party does get things done, and they are able to manage. Starmer very quickly fell out of his depth and has been flailing around, and he's been fortunate in that the Conservatives are in such dire straits. But it won't be enough in Britain to save Labor at the next election. I think we're looking at minority government in Britain, maybe a Labor minority government, and it won't be Starmer as Prime Minister, which was disastrous last time. In Australia, the Green Party, I think, is going to be caught a bit on the hop. I hope not. We need a centre-left party, which the Greens are and aren't. There's centre-right people in the Greens as well. And I've said before, the big challenge of the Greens is the actual broadness of the church. Howard calling the Liberal Party a broad church while purging all the moderate left was right for about 6 months, and then suddenly it wasn't as broad as he was claiming, whereas the Greens are a very broad church.
But just getting back to that idea of the splintering and the realignment of politics, which is now happening, as you clearly predicted, David, but we have to remember that splintering only happens when things start falling apart. And, well, that goes without saying, I guess. But if we start looking at some different scenarios, we can't predict the future, but we can have a look at the possibilities. But if Labor does start getting into some serious political trouble over this next term, and we have to remember that all governments, no matter how successful they are or how great a Prime Minister might be, they will always run into serious problems during a term. It happened to Robert Menzies, it happened to Bob Hawke, it happened to John Howard. Some Prime Ministers just have serious problems all the time, like Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison, and they just cannot get away from those serious problems. But the point is that it will always happen. And for Anthony Albanese in the Labor government, well, it could be an unpopular war, it could be poor economic conditions, a few bad policy announcements here and there, or circumstances that are just totally outside of their control. And the other point is that people eventually get sick of a government or a prime minister, and after 4, 5, 6 years or whatever it is. And theoretically, if the Australian Greens can take advantage of that, get into some populist themes along the lines of housing affordability or economic inequality, targeting the TAFE system instead of universities all the time, looking at their anti-war messaging and policies that appeal to working class people, well, that will make things very interesting electorally, because at the moment the Greens are polling at around 14.5% and the Labor government is around 26.5%. And say if the Greens lift by 4 or 5% at the expense of the Labor Party, and I know that's not going to be as clear as that, but say if that does happen, well, you're just going to have this, according to the opinion polls, you're going to have this cluster of parties that are polling in that band between 20 and 24%. And that in itself is quite remarkable. And how all of this is going to be worked out, if it's like that when it comes to election time, well, that's anyone's guess, because it's pretty obvious that the two-party system is breaking down. And we're only in the stages of the hypothetical at the moment, but that's what we're paid to do, David. Yeah. We'll have to wait until the next federal election to see how all of this pans out. But it's just becoming a lot more volatile, a lot more unpredictable, and definitely a lot more interesting.
Oh, for sure. We're looking at a realignment. It's not going to be violence in the streets, and it's not even maybe going to be noticed by a lot of people.
We're not looking at it, David. It's actually happening right now.
Sorry, when I say we're looking at it, I mean we are actually looking at it. And it's not violent. It's just Angus Taylor as the devolution of Liberal Party leadership. The Labor Party being scared of visionary leaders and bringing in competence and capability. Now, again, competence and capability will take you a long way, but it doesn't tend to leave a stamp. When you finish, you fall into the second line of prime ministers, maybe fondly remembered by political nerds, but not remembered in the way that a Bob Hawke or a Gough Whitlam is remembered, even if you end up being a longer term. In the next 12 months, I think we're going to see, we've got the Victorian election coming up, in which Labor is very unpopular. In normal circumstances, we'd say they're going to lose, but there's nobody to replace them in government. So I suspect, and I don't know yet because I haven't looked at the numbers properly yet, but I suspect we're going to end up with some kind of minority government, which Jacinta Allen will be blamed for. But these are forces that are beyond what even I suspect Dan Andrews could do. That'll be the 6th victory for Labor, which is a long time and pretty much unprecedented, unless you gerrymander like Joe Bjelke-Petersen did. But the government down there is tired. The state feels like it could do with a change. And none of this is to disparage the government down there. I think
Melbourne has recently been voted the best city in the world.
Yeah.
How can you vote against that?
How do you vote against that? They will, but who replaces them? The Liberal Party is a basket case. The Greens aren't quite big enough, although I don't know how many teal independents there'll be, but can you get a minority coalition from 14 or 15 independents? Technically, yes. But practically, can they? We'll have to see. And of course, One Nation tends to be popular the further north you go as well. So yeah, I think the Victorian election may be our first indication of how things are going to go.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month. And we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.